morning, everyone. Welcome to this session on green energy, new challenges and opportunities for economic zones in Africa. We've got a great session for you this morning. First of all, I'm going to introduce the contributors that we've got to the session. We'll then have some opening remarks from the European Commission and also from the Africa Economic Zones Organisation. I'm then going to share a scene-setting presentation around the topic for the session. And then we're going to move to some contributions from the panelists, and then have a discussion and then a Q&A at the end. We also have a poll for this session that you will see shortly in your chat, which is to get your views on some of the key challenges and issues relating to energy and economic zones in Africa. So we've got an hour this morning, and I'll just give you an overview of the speakers and contributors we have for you today. So first of all, we've got Mrs. Laura Atienza from the European Commission. She is head of sector for DG INTPA, which is the part of the EU dealing with private sector and trade. And she's been working significantly on international partnerships within the Commission. We've also got Johann Vandenberg, who's head of secretariat of the Africa-EU Energy Partnership. Mr. Ahmed Bennis, who's Secretary General of the Africa Economic Zones Organisation, and also Secretary General of the Africa Ports Task Force, as well as a Group Business Development Director at Ahmed. We've got Mr. Mamadou Diakhite, who's Acting Head of Environmental Sustainability Division at the African Union Development Agency and NEPAD. Joining us shortly will be Mr. Ahmed Benlarabi, who's Head of PV Systems at IRESEN. And we also have, I think that's everybody actually. So we've got a broad range of speakers there from different interests. Myself, I'm moderator for today's session. I'm Roger Savage, and I'm Group Director at Buro Happold, leading our cities consulting business, and have worked very closely around special economic zones and dealing with energy challenges in Africa and elsewhere as well. So that's our speakers and contributors for today. I'm now going to invite some opening remarks, firstly from Laura Atienza from the European Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here today in this very relevant event on challenges and opportunities for economic zones development in Africa, which are very numerous. We were just discussing a bit before the opening of this session that there are at least 70 or more already factual projects and others in preparation in Africa of special economic zones, and their contribution to economic growth, employment are very relevant. And this is it's a moment in which it's particularly important to be able to use the trends of green economy to be able to contribute to sustainable development. From the European Union side, we also very much welcome this event as a series of the EU-Africa Business Forum events that are being organized jointly with the very important partners. In this case, we partner with also the African Union, the Portuguese presidency, and we welcome very much the partnership with the private sector and the invitation from the African Economic Zones Organization in this case. So thank you very much. One of the main EU priorities now, one of the main policy priorities for sustainable development together with our country partners, and in particular with our African country partners, is the green transition. So the Green Deal is for us a main priority, together also with digitalization and, of course, inclusive, sustainable growth. The green agenda is critical, therefore, for the EU-Africa partnership from our side, as it has been laid in the EU communication towards a comprehensive strategy with Africa. And this means that under the new financial package, which is being defined now for 2021 to 2027, we should have 30% of the spending target directed for climate-related actions, which means, in figures, more than 21 billion over the 7 years. So this just to show how much of a priority this is for the European Union. And we want to bring impact into our partner countries and more specifically with our African partner countries with also a Team Europe approach, which means to bring together the different resources, networks, capacities from European actors on the ground to increase our impact. This requires not only to have this policy priority, but of course to put that in motion with an increase in investments, with also strong business links with the private sector, with new business models, and with a full commitment of all the actors. So that's why we believe that the series of events, and in particular this event, works very much towards these joint efforts, in particular together with the private sector. In terms of boosting the investments, we have set up the new European guarantee, which enables to have up to more than 60 billion from the EU budget to invest in guarantees for investments around the world and for Africa in priority. We also believe and work towards, together with increasing investments and in particular de-risking private investments, also in the improvement of the investment climate in partner countries. So this is something that we also want to increase our work together with the private sector in this sense. So just to, as I see, I wouldn't like to go ahead of the time. To conclude, very happy to be here today, very happy to partner together with the private sector in particular toward these general objectives, and in particular on how the economic zones in Africa can further develop for sustainable growth, and in particular with a green economy approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. That was great. I'm now going to invite Mr. Ahmed Bennis from the Africa Economic Zones Organization to give his opening remarks.
Thank you,
to you, Ahmed.
Thank you, Laura. Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to you and good afternoon for the ones who are already in the afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here with you in the opening of this webinar session. Unfortunately, we cannot meet in person, but let's use the best of this technology to exchange our views and experience on such important topics. We are also delighted to welcome the initiative of holding this webinar and raise awareness about this important initiatives. And for us, it's definitely the right time in Africa when embarking in an integrated market under the CFTA. The role of the green energy becomes more and more significant, and the involvement of the economic zones is undoubtedly compulsory. So before I go ahead, I wanted also to express my thanks to the EU-Africa Business Forum team for giving us the opportunity to bring such fine group of experts to discuss the challenges and opportunities toward green energy transition in Africa, and the prospects of African economic zones in fast-tracking this process. So before we move forward, allow me also to introduce our organization. So we are the representative of the African economic zones, connecting more than 82 members that represent almost 45 African countries. And since its inception, the African SEZ have given a significant boost to FDI flows, creating an attractive investment conditions, and of course supporting job creation. Over the last 5 years, 60 million jobs have been created in agro-processing, industrial, manufacturing, and services. But energy has been a primary driver for the economic growth in the continent, and also for wealth creation, for poverty eradications. And the growing population and the economic progress call for a rapid increase of electricity supply with the sustainable energy sources and energy efficiency measures as a basis for a long-term prosperity. While in Africa is still investing in fossil energy and fossil fuel, change of direction is needed today in the energy sector by harnessing the potential of the green energy. So comprehensive reforms will be needed to improve the investment climate and attract the financing for building a sustainable energy system in Africa. And this has to support the socio-economic development, a sustainable industrializations and trade towards the continent. This will be also key for the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreements that went live January this year, and the achievement of the 300 gigawatt targets of the Africa Renewable Energy Initiatives by 2030. The CFTA, the Paris Agreement, the Agenda 2030, and its linked sustainable development goals rightly set the target of substantially increasing the share of renewable energy and doubling the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency by 2030. And meeting this target and successfully implementing those agreements require all African countries to undertake a transition toward a green energy program. The Africa economic zones are increasingly playing a key role in the Africa's industrialization transformation and can maximize the benefits of the green transition in full compliance with all these agreements. And the potential role of SEZ as a focal point for the green pathway is enhanced by the export-oriented activity, its integration with the global supply chain, and its also involvement in business and investment density. So the international pressure today to combine environmental and economic performance are placing the SEZ activities and an increasing scrutiny. So the international commitments today with all these agreements require a national government to reduce not only CO2 emission, but also the international producers are facing mounting consumer pressure to ensure sustainable global supply chain. So the SEZ could be also one of the instruments to combine environmental, economic targets and remain a major trigger for policy reform by promoting the diversification of the country's energy sources and provide adequate environment for experimenting new approach for green energy transition and industrialization. There are prerequisites for such transformation, such as the implementation of reliable regulatory framework, which is mandatory, which is important. There is also the access to the international expertise and to the innovative technology solution that has to be implemented within the continent and using the SEZ as the right platform for its development. Then the strong financial policy fundamentals has also to be one of the major pillar for such transformation. So for the African economic zone, the green energy transition represents both an opportunities and some challenges. So on one hand, the huge energy deficit in production and access combined with an abundant renewable energy resources that exist today can underpin a relatively rapid and encompassing shift to green energy. But on the other hand, challenges related to access to finance, to investment risk, to the absence of the needed technical and human capacity may, of course, impede this transition. On the other side, SEZ could also provide certain opportunity to achieve the green growth by, first of all, implementing a greener production process. This goes, for instance, by encouraging energy efficiency improvements within the existing industry. Second is testing innovative green policy, we have many examples towards the continent, but the objective is to set up a low carbon target and test an experimental policy that aims to reduce environmental impact and, of course, contribute to the economic growth. And third is developing a green product supply chain by attracting the right investment and dedicated investment towards a supply chain that support the green transitions. And here we can also have in mind the solar energy panel producer, the wind energy, the wind blade producer, and so on. So today we are entitled to develop new processes supporting green energy transitions and achieving international environmental commitments while pursuing industrial development. This has to be translated into national objective and activity sectors that has to be developed within the economic zones. Eco-industrial park can be a leverage to the existing investments, to the resource reserve, and also to set up a logistic infrastructure that would produce industrial goods more efficiently and to reduce the environmental impact. Ladies and gentlemen, today is about collaborating, sharing knowledge and ideas, and getting the critical momentum for the green energy sector to thrive in all our economic zones. The COVID-19 crisis has changed a lot in the world, in the world around us, and dealing with its immediate impact on recovering our economy and preventing a destructive changing climate in the future is one of our priorities. So with these few remarks, I welcome you once again to this webinar session, and I look forward for a fruitful and engaging deliberation during this session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. That was a real rallying cry for making the link between special economic zones and the potential role they can play in addressing the energy needs and challenges of Africa. So thank you for that. The next part of the session is a short presentation from myself, really framing some of the challenges and opportunities specifically relating to economic zones development in Africa. In terms of this session, remember there's a chance to raise questions. We'll be having a Q&A at the end. And also we have a poll after this presentation to get your perspective on what you see as the main challenges. My background is at Buro Happold is as a multidisciplinary consultant. So we're working at a practical level with special economic zones and with policymakers addressing some of these issues. So this kind of survey of the landscape is our take on it and highlighting some of the opportunities and gaps that we see. But we'll put this on the table and in the discussion we'll see what the reflections are from some of the other contributors and participants today. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the wider energy challenges. Why aren't some of the linkages already being made, and what are some of the critical issues that need to be addressed? I'm then going to review the specific green energy opportunities that could be delivered or addressed in conjunction with special economic zones, and then finish on some of the keys to success that we see from our perspective. So our view is that there is a significant opportunity for special economic zones to really anchor and help solve some of the energy access and energy efficiency challenges within Africa, and to really help catalyse investment in energy infrastructure that's needed to enable a more regenerative model of economic development. So energy has always really been a driver of economic growth in Africa, of wealth creation and of poverty eradication. As Mr. Ahmed touched upon, special economic zones provide an opportunity really to provide an investment environment and a policy environment that can help to address both of these challenges together. Some of the issues that we have is that economic policies and energy policies are not fully aligned in many African countries, and the scope for some policy and regulatory initiatives to link the two together. I think everyone would be familiar to see a huge pipeline of energy projects in most African countries, and then separately to have a special economic zones program or industrialization initiatives that aren't necessarily directly connected. Now, the challenges around the technological innovation and the opportunities for linking that with sustainable energy production. Whilst a lot of the technologies are well known, there's a number of more innovative technologies and approaches that are relevant to economic zones that there isn't widespread practice of yet in Africa. So providing partnerships and providing the conditions to support innovation is really critical. And building the capability and capacity within Africa and within special economic zones and national ministries and supporting organizations is really key. That can really be achieved through partnerships, working with international organizations and others. And then, of course, there's the broader energy challenge around energy access in Africa and promoting the efficient use of energy. So our view is that special economic zones and the energy infrastructure that's delivered in conjunction with them can really be a hub and a catalyst for meeting the needs of the wider area of cities and of regions within which they're located. So by addressing these challenges, we can really maximize the benefits of a green transition, support socioeconomic development, industrialization and trade, and lead to long-term prosperity. I'm now just going to sort of take you on a quick canter through some of the specific green energy opportunities for special economic zones. I suppose the default position in most African countries is that the energy system is centralized. The model and the approach to investment is typically promoting large-scale generation linked to grid-connected energy. Obviously, in recent years, there's been a shift towards greener sources of energy, particularly solar, wind in some African countries. And then in parts of Africa, there's also opportunities for geothermal sources of power, particularly in the Rift Valley in East Africa. And then there's obviously legacy hydro schemes, and then also some new hydro schemes that also power producers, including the new scheme in Ethiopia. And then other sources of green and non-renewable sources also are part of the mix. In terms of the challenges and opportunities of this approach, I suppose solar is the one which has accelerated most in recent years because it's flexible and it's also in terms of its scale, and it's obviously a free resource that is relatively mobile. It's not tied to particular natural resources. Again, I think the main challenge here is really around aggregating demand and tackling the issue around transmission and distribution networks that can be an impediment to really implementing and achieving projects. So special economic zones have an advantage of having an institution and an organizational framework that can really help to broker and align both the energy and the industrialization agenda and really get the scale of demand that can support the investment in energy infrastructure. However, despite that, from some of our project experiences, there are sometimes disconnects in terms of agreeing power purchaser agreements. There are challenges in terms of aligning technical details and investment. So it can take maybe 2 or 3 years just to procure substations and infrastructure required to support a new special economic zone. So greater coordination and partnerships around that could be a key to unlocking this and accelerating what grid-connected clean energy could deliver. The second sort of opportunities is really around special economic zones really creating their own decentralized energy networks with a kind of an energy service company or a multi-utility company as part of their setup. So in this scenario, you could have a co-located or a nearby solar farm, for example, which would specifically serve the needs of the special economic zone, and then sell or distribute surplus power either to the national grid or direct to other nearby users through its own dedicated network. So many light industries, they don't have huge power requirements. So if you think of things like apparel and clothing, it's really power is the key input. And it is possible to establish zones with a dedicated solar farm, for example, that can start to support particularly light industries. Again, I think the challenge around this is that the institutional and the legal environment in some countries does not really promote this approach because it's very, very much geared towards a centralized model. But there are examples in Africa, and it's common internationally to adopt this type of model. And we're seeing increasing take-up of decentralized models elsewhere. Another opportunity that is open to zones is really around green energy from waste. So a number of technologies are very readily available. Obviously, there's the traditional combustion incinerators that are perhaps less good because of their emissions, the environmental impacts. But there's cleaner forms of energy from waste, including landfill gas recovery, pyrolysis, gasification, and particularly anaerobic digestion, which again is quite a flexible, low-cost model that can really harness and utilize the waste streams from their surrounding area, from industrial, residential, and commercial users, and then turn that into power, which again can be used within the zone or sold back to the grid. Again, there tends to be greater support for this, and the investment climate is very positive. So again, there's projects that we've been advising on and reviewing recently in Kenya that have also gained support and interest from the Green Climate Fund, for example, to deliver these types of technologies. The next one is around industrial symbiosis and really the opportunities that special economic zones deliver from the clustering of industries and activities. So the advantage here is really around production, energy and material efficiencies that you can achieve through co-location. And this covers not only energy, but also water, logistics and transport, etc. So the principle here is really about closing loops and adopting a circular economy model, which is possible within a special economic zone because you're providing a planned, a master planned industrial project. You're able to co-locate like-minded users together, and you're also being able to provide shared infrastructure, not only for power, but also thinking of things like steam, heat networks, and also water treatment. So every factory doesn't provide for its own needs. It uses shared infrastructure throughout the whole project. You can also co-locate and target particular value chains so that the waste products of one industry can become the inputs of others. Some of the best examples which could be taken up almost anywhere are really around the food sector and agro-processing. But it's also highly relevant, particularly to heavier industries. And this is really where this industrial symbiosis concept originated, really. In Kalundborg in Denmark is the most famous example, but you can see clusters almost in many parts of the world now. Again, there's a particular opportunity linked to steam and industrial processes. And in the areas of Africa that have the benefit of geothermal energy, this is particularly possible. So in Kenya and East Africa, I know that there's projects being promoted in this regard. So it's possible to use the steam and heat that's produced for things like paper and pulp production, drying processes, heating processes, and also it's possible to look at, on the flip side, cooling processes as well. So again, it's opportunities through co-location and the clustering of particular activities that can benefit from this shared infrastructure. And then the final one, which is really emerging on the scene, is really around hydrogen industries. So this is something that where there's been significant investment taken place in Australia, in Germany, in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, and is now also being taken up in other countries, including the UK. But it's also open to African countries. I think the opportunity here is particularly for green hydrogen. And what we mean by that is basically producing hydrogen from green energy sources such as solar. The opportunity here is really to support the more energy intensive industries in a more sustainable way that can be achieved from fossil fuels. So the idea here is that the green energy supply from electricity is used to support a desalination process. And it's important that this is a zero liquid discharge so that you don't get the environmental issues around the environment and around seawater linked to this. But you can then use that water directly to support industry, agriculture, and residential. Obviously, water is as much of a challenge as energy for many special economic zones. And then you can use a process of electrolysis to then produce hydrogen on the one hand, and then brine on the other. So that the hydrogen can be used to as a fuel. It's easier to store. Obviously, renewable and clean power can be stored by battery, but that's quite expensive to do at high volumes. It can be used for vehicle use, and it gives you additional options, particularly to support energy intense uses because of the density and the energy potential of this fuel. And on the other hand, the brine that comes from electrolysis can be used through crystallization to produce a number of chemical and industrial products, including sodium, magnesium, calcium, bromine, potassium, and the different salts linked to that, which can support downstream manufacturing processes. So at the moment, there isn't a project like this in Africa, but particularly in Saudi Arabia and in the Middle East, this is particularly being looked at to support a green and clean industries hub. So that's a review of the opportunities. I think some of the keys to success are shown in the middle here, and I think we'll touch on in our discussion. I think the business environment is key, and getting the regulatory environment aligned, both in terms of institutions and to link your industry and power sector regulation together so they're harmonized. You still need to tackle and attract investment. So your framework for investment attraction is important. It's important to have the right expertise to develop the right solutions for the right context, selecting the right sources of energy, and to link together the different components of the project. There's a lot of coordination required to get this right. The financing models and the power purchasing agreements need to be in place. And then for the solutions that require co-locating, it's important to tackle the land use and master planning challenges so that you can achieve a successful and efficient cluster on the ground. And of course, partnerships, including public-private partnerships, are really critical for supporting investment. So that's a quick canter through some of the challenges, opportunities, and keys to success. We're now going to move to our poll to get your views on what you see as the particular challenges of addressing energy within special economic zones. So I think we can see the poll in the chat. So a few of you, or quite a few of you, have been contributing to that discussion. I'm not sure if we can pop that up on the screen, but I can read out the replies of what the results are so far. So our question was, what do you see as the most significant challenge to overcome? The top result was 44% of you thought finance for green solutions. 33% of you thought policy and regulation was the most significant challenge. We've then 11% got institutional frameworks not in place. And then another 11% highlighting overcoming the coordination challenge as the most significant issue. So some interesting perspectives there, and I think I agree. It's not only one thing that needs to come together. I think all of those are relevant issues there. But finance has come out on top this morning, at least, as the most significant one. Okay, so we're now going to move to our panel discussion, and I'm going to invite Mr. Mamadou Diakhite to share his reflections and thoughts first of all. And I think you have a slide or two to share.
All right. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for this invitation from the EU Africa Business Forum, and also give us this opportunity from the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, to present some of the programs, activities, projects from the African Union member states to address the need to access secure, sustainable energy for all in Africa. So I will run you through our presentation and then have some interaction if need be. So our general assessment is that investment in energy generation, transmission, distribution, and its different usages varies from one country to another in Africa. We had a recent World Bank report that said that 32 out of 48 countries in Africa can be considered as being in energy crisis, ranging with factors ranging from poor investment, lack of infrastructure in energy generation, transmission, distribution, and also unreliable supply and use. While we have still few African countries, especially Northern African countries, who are exporting energy. So there is a lot of, like Roger's presentation before, there is a lot of work to do to meet this energy demand which is rising in Africa. So the Africa challenges for the energy has been recognized in many international and continental instruments like the Africa Vision, the African Union Vision Agenda 2063, the Sustainable Development Goals that aim to universal access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy by 2030. While the African Union Agenda 2063 targets 50% increase in electricity generation distribution, and having 70% of African to have access to electricity by 2030. As also the previous presentation showed, there are a lot of potential in Africa for access to diversified and stable energy, and that can go from renewable and solar energy, hydropower, wind turbine, biomass, etc., to oil, gas, thermal, and nuclear energies. So the bridging the energy gap of the continent, if we consider those energy challenges in Africa and the effect of these challenges, it affects almost 50%, 56% of the continent with no access to stable energy. 633 million of people lacking access to energy, and almost 800 million relies on traditional and biomass for their primary energy sources. This leads or exacerbates poverty, low productive capacities, with very strong consequences into human well-being and Africa development as a whole. So these trends are expected to rise unless we have a radical transformation that takes place by investing on energy in the continent. So the energy factor is key also. Infrastructure is key to realizing the Africa energy goals. Funding is key. The energy infrastructure, which is mainly financed with public resources, create a big gap due to the financial constraints that African governments are facing, and this is also a call that is reiterated for donors, and the EU representative mentioned this the budget that EU is putting in place for energy access, especially for Africa. Also encouraging the PPPs with private sector involvement, including the private sector, African private sector, that to be involved to scale up energy infrastructure of Africa. We have also assessed the aging of infrastructure. Most of the electricity infrastructure were built in the 1960s. So this is a call for adequate resourcing and for the refurbishment and introduction of modern technology to scale up the existing one. So at the African Union level, there are many approaches, programs to tackle the energy challenges in Africa. And to do so, the African Union heads of states has set up a high panel on emerging technologies, which give the following recommendation to the member states of African Union and to the regional economic communities, as well as all the involved partners, to consider the microgrid implementation to be adapted and contextualized, to develop skills and capacities for addressing the underserved communities, harmonize regulatory frameworks for grid development, microgrid implementation to be based on multi-sectoral collaboration, and increase women participation to the energy sector, and support the training skills with higher education, research, and institutions to implement programs with strong focus on renewable energies. As you may know, the African Union Development agency where I am based in Johannesburg is the implementing agency of the African Union, and we have started developing an approach to green economy transition in Africa, and to implement that approach, we try to focus on sustainable development agenda, which demand the solid collaboration across sectors within continental, regional, national, and subnational areas, involving all the relevant ministries, academia, development partners, civil society, private sectors, women community leaders, and youth. This integrated approach will foster inclusive, collaborative, and responsive processes. The third level of this green energy transition is the interface between for the coherence of the two above sectors, which will help to have an effective execution of the programs with tangible results and the changes that we alluded earlier. So the AUDA-NEPAD proposed integrated approach is guided by three dimensions: the multisectoral interdependency, integration of spatial dimension to development, and stakeholder participation. And also, AUDA-NEPAD has went down to start executing, having interventions on the green energy sector. And we launched a first program last year, right before the lockdown. We launched a multi-sectorial dimension. Okay, I have only 1 minute. Thank you, Farah. And yes, we brought some countries that are considered as having the lowest access to energy in Africa. And we will share the PowerPoint after. And we started working with those countries. These are the main recommendations of our accelerating access to clean energy and green energy in Africa, funding issues, building partnership, technology transfer, research and development, and capacity building and knowledge sharing. This is my last slide to see just that Africa is also making big steps for this energy sovereignty and access to energy to most of the African populations. We have one project in Egypt, which is bound to be the largest solar power plant in Africa. We started a project with 100 kilowatt in Sierra Leone with access to water, and also improving food security through irrigation, and also mentioned the Desertec solar project in Africa, in Morocco, serving the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe energy market. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mamadou. That was really insightful in terms of the types of initiatives that you've been progressing at African Union and NEPAD. We're now going to move to the panel discussion. And first of all, I'd like to invite Johann Vandenberg just to give his reflection on the debate and the materials so far, and maybe get his perspective on how we can accelerate progress towards this agenda, particularly from his perspective at the Africa-EU Energy Partnership.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard, and good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Just to give you a brief introduction, the Africa Energy Partnership is Africa and Europe's gateway for joint action on a green energy future. So we are the energy component of that political partnership between Africa and Europe that is now 14 years old and is now going into a very interesting new phase with the launch of the Green Energy Initiative. I've listened with great interest to the discussions. What I can say is that, from the political perspective, there is a lot of very powerful moves towards even greater collaboration at the international level, and a lot of deep expressions of deep interest and intent. And I think definitely this will happen on the specifics of the energy challenges of economic zones. I could say more from my perspectives and time in South Africa and in Africa, but just containing myself for the moment to your specific question, I think the Green Energy Initiative will set a new framework between Africa and Europe, leading up at least to 2030, with a very strong eye on the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think initiatives like the one we're talking about now fit into an existing framework that has got a lot of impetus and strong institutions and people behind it.
Oh, thanks, Johann. Is there a perspective from the other panelists as to what could accelerate progress further on this agenda? We've heard a few suggestions and ideas. Are there any reflections on what the critical elements could be?
I think, Roger, one of the main challenges within the special economic zones today is the legal framework and, of course, the access to finance. But the regulatory framework that has to be in place would definitely foster the implementation of any green energy initiatives. Besides also the financing, which remain the main issue for the African economy as a whole. But I think implementing the legal framework is also one of the priorities that we have to address very quickly within the SEZ community.
Are there any examples of sort of good practice within Africa? Do you think any particular country has cracked it, or do you think we're not there yet and there's work on different fronts? I don't know if panelists know of any countries which are at the front in terms of progressing this.
I think we have a good business case, Roger, with Morocco, and we have Mr. Benlarabi here to share some insight about the Moroccan initiatives, and maybe Johann can give some complementary notes on that.
Yeah, Roger, would you like me to respond? Or?
Yes, please do. Okay. I think it'd be great to hear your experience of Morocco and what you've been.
So my experience was more on the South African side. I mean, Morocco lifted its rate of electrification from just into double digits in the 90s to high 90s now. But the story I know well is the South African one, where we at the time procured something like 5,000 megawatts of renewable energy in 3 or 4 years from an almost non-existent baseline. And this was because the regulatory framework was very well crafted. What excites me about economic zones is that they are like mini countries in a way. You can often make special rules. Whatever happens in the rest of the country, the rules can be a little bit different for the economic zone. That's the nature of the beast. So you can also optimize rules for that specific zone and then create things that in the rest of the country might be quite difficult to do.
Yeah, no, I think that's very valid. I agree with that. Our time is running to a close, so I wanted to give an opportunity to Ahmed Benlarabi from IRESEN. He's head of PV systems there. And to get your perspective on your experiences of implementing green energy solutions on the ground in Morocco.
Okay, so basically, since I have only 3 minutes, and the previous panelists have already covered pretty much everything. They should started with a spoiler alert. I made that joke last time. Still the case. So basically, I will pass really quickly through my presentation, Well, so basically, just a small introduction about my institution, which is IRESEN, the Research Institute in Solar Energy and New Energies. It has been created in 2011 under the aegis of the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Sustainable Development, with the aim to support the government in its renewable strategy, and this is through R&D. And basically, it is both a funding agency and a research center. So the main positioning is the research and innovation, so basically not fundamental research, but applied one, training also through research again, and finally business creation, so somehow contributing to the local industrial fabric by diversifying and integrating as much as we can from the value chain of renewables. Locally. So basically, so far since the creation in 2011, we financed through the funding agency something like 40 million up to 2017. That helped financing more than 801 researchers and PhD students and the creation of 17 laboratories across the kingdom. In the other hand, we are also setting up, so the research center is through setting up platforms through the whole continent, actually, not only in Morocco. So basically, we started with the Green Energy Park, where I'm located so far, based in Ben Guerir, which is nearby Marrakesh. Also, the Green and Smart Building Park, but we will see them a little bit more in detail afterward. And finally, the Green Energy Park Maroc Côte d'Ivoire, that is based in Ivory Coast, and that will be operational by the end of the year. So basically, this is Green Energy Park. This is already operational and set up. It's a platform dedicated for solar energy, so both photovoltaics and solar thermal. And through this platform, we aim to have different aspects, a whole roadmap, actually, that positions ourselves for the identification of the most suited technologies for the local conditions, how we can also maximize the use of those technology and their integration in industry, both for electricity generation or also to be integrated and use direct heat, for instance, into industrial processes. And finally, setting up also and trying to support the government from a regulatory point of view, especially through certification and quality check, especially that we know, unfortunately, that there is a lot of products that are not certified circulating in the black market here in Morocco. So it goes the same a little bit for the CSP, which is the solar thermal. Since it's only 3 minutes, so I need to skip it. For the second platform, which is the Green and Smart Building Park, and that will be also operational by the end of the year. It's a platform dedicated for energy efficiency in buildings, smart grids, and electrical mobility. And so far, we've already started some works, especially in sustainable mobility, where we developed the first charging station, 100% made Moroccan. And now we are in the phases of creating its startup to start commercializing it with some costs that are quite competitive considering the competition existing. So basically, we also held just before the COVID-19 in 2019, the first edition of the Solar Decathlon Africa to popularize the use of renewables and their integration in buildings. It showed the participation of more than 1,000 students, 57 universities, 20 countries. And all the buildings that you see in here have been actually constructed under 3 weeks by the students. This is the platform for Ivory Coast. So far we are constructing the building, and we have started already the setup of the outdoor infrastructure. It means to help consolidate the capacity building and the transfer of knowledge and know-how between Morocco and Ivory Coast, as well as be a complementary platform to the Green Energy Park that is already based here in Morocco, so that we can compare the behavior of technologies in both conditions, so semi-arid and arid conditions, as well as semi-tropical conditions. On the other hand,
Mr. Benlarabi, Sorry, but we have just a few seconds left.
Okay. So I'll go directly to the green hydrogen, even though Mr. Savage already introduced the concept. But the main thing, what I wanted to share and complete the vision is concerning Morocco. So we've already started a lot of works on that matter, especially a study that has already showed that Morocco is one of the 5 countries worldwide having a huge potential to position itself as an exporter of green energy and green molecules. So basically, we already set up a roadmap on the midterm, short-term, and long-term, with the first instance having industry feedstocks and export with a capacity at Horizon 2030 of 8 gigawatt, and another 20 gigawatt by 2040, and 80 gigawatts of potential by 2050. So it covers pretty much all the value chains and sectors. So I will skip all of that. So far, what we've done as Green Energy Park to initiate some project in that matter is the fact that we've already started some small project, pilot one. So first, a small electrolyzer for hydrogen production that is set up here at Benlarabi with a capacity of 20 kilowatts. Also, another project that is for production of green ammonia for the use of the group OCP for fertilizer production with a capacity of 4 megawatts. It's under construction. And finally, another project that is for power to X, so production of hydrogen that can be used afterward as green fuels for airplanes and mobility with an approximate capacity of a ton a day, fortunately. And finally, another topic that maybe the economic zones will be really interested in is the system of storage for the export of green molecules to the Europe. And now we are starting with a new technology for the storage in salt caverns. So it is under study so far from the ethical aspect, and we are hoping that we will be having results quite soon. So basically here, that's what we need to be done, especially between Europe and Africa. So basically, a support and exchanges on the public bodies and institutions for the regulation, and policies that needs to be instilled, a huge sharing of knowledge and know-how from R&D and innovation and capacity building point of view, and of course, a mix in industries to complement each other in terms of this topic. So thank you. I hope I was on time. Sorry, there was a lot of information. I hope I shared.
I think it's a great experience that you've got there, and I think you've highlighted what can be achieved with having the kind of institutional partnerships linking directly with the Green Energy Park and the economic zones. So hopefully we can see more of this elsewhere in Africa as well. We don't have time for any questions, unfortunately, but I'd like to thank again the different panelists that have joined us this morning. And I think it's an exciting agenda ahead over the next few years to take this further. I look forward to engaging and supporting around this initiative. And I can say the same for the others on the panel. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.